one of the things that, one of the forms of mind control, it's called trauma-based mind control. What you do is you traumatize people. They want to take kids, ideally before the age of 6, and they put them through horrific trauma. They establish what makes the child ladies and gentlemen, what I'm just about to say, this is the mentality that was behind the lockdown and is behind what was happening now, the cult. They find out and establish what terrifies the child, and then they subject the child to it. They'll subject the child to watching an animal be sacrificed. They might, in the extreme cases, make the child watch a human be sacrificed. And what happens is that there's a mechanism in the mind which shuts away, basically puts behind an amnesic barrier, horrific memories, so the conscious mind is not constantly reliving them. And they call these isolated fragments of minds, memories, alters, as in altered states. And I've mentioned it before. What they then do is they program these alters with different tasks, like Manchurian candidates, etc. And they have what they call a front alter, which is the personality that seems to be the person that people interact with. But in the background, in the subconscious, are these other alters, which are programmed with certain behavior traits. It might be an assassination, it could be lots of things, honey traps, anything. And they have a word, a phrase, some kind of code that's hypnotically put into the mind, that when the person hears it, or even sees it, it can be a symbol, the alter that relates to will become the front alter. And the front alter will go into the subconscious. Now this alter, which has a completely different perception of reality to the front alter, which seems to be the normal personality of the person, will then carry out its programmed task. And one of the massively common ways that this is used is for very famous people to have sex, and sometimes horrific sex, with girls and women under this mind control. Because what happens then is, after it's happened, they bring the front alter back, and they put the alter that's experienced, like the sex abuse or whatever, into the subconscious mind. The front alter's back, it has not experienced the sexual attack or whatever the behavior is, therefore knows nothing about it. Where I'm going with this is, the word they use to activate the alters and the switch is trigger. Someone's been triggered. Now you look at the woke psychology. What are they saying all the time? I've been triggered. They're putting things in educational documents and what have you, called trigger warnings, that something you might not like is coming up. Trigger warning. That I'm even seeing in the collective war on the human psyche the language of mind control that they've been using for decades and decades. And so one of the expressions, and very relevant to today, of this mind control, what they call trauma-based mind control, is that when someone's traumatized, in a state of anxiety, in a state of fear, they become massively suggestible. This is why they use trauma as part of the mind programming. So what they're doing to humanity as a whole is producing reasons to fear, reasons for trauma, reasons for anxiety. And when they've manipulated people into those states, they then put the mind control suggestions in there of that change perception.
This is happening to all of us right now.
Right now. So, for instance, if you get someone, and a lot of people watching this will have seen this in their own experience in the last few months, if you get someone so traumatized about a deadly virus, they become absolutely open to hypnotic suggestion, because this cult is not really targeting the conscious mind overwhelmingly. It's targeting the subconscious mind, which then filters through to become conscious perception. They put the suggestions in and change people's psyche. And this has worked to such an extreme that cancer doctors and other people in the specialists of heart disease and what have you. I mean, I remember a line from a British cancer specialist when he's saying how the lives of so many people are going to be significantly shortened because of the lack of treatment and diagnosis during the lockdown. He said people are more frightened of COVID-19 than they are of cancer. Now, this is what happens when you get people into a traumatized state and then you put the suggestions in. You completely, you basically hypnotize them. What's happened is that so many people in the last few months have been put under a hypnotic spell. And indeed, people are put through a hypnotic spell their entire lives. You go through the education system and then into the world of, where the media is telling you everything that you should believe and everything that's real and what have you. It's a hypnotic spell that's being cast on the human race. And when people talk about people waking up, what does that mean? It means they wake up from the trance. They wake up from the spell. And so I meet so many people because of what I do who say, I read your book, or I saw you do this, or whatever. And suddenly I just saw it. I just got it. And what do they say? I woke up. It's exactly what happens. When you can put out information that's putting a different angle on everything, what you're doing is breaking the spell. Because the spell is basically all that anyone's ever heard. All mainstream sources, they're all sources of the spell. And when people hear other sources of information and other ways of looking at the world, it breaks the spell. And people say, I woke up. Yeah, you woke up from the trance that you've basically been put in since the day you were born.
I even caught myself over the past couple weeks saying, am I white privileged? No, I'm not. Of course I'm not. Maybe I am. No, I'm not. And so then I realized I had bought into their narrative. And I was like, wait a second. Now I've made a choice. Now I've identified this thing, and now I have to start questioning a narrative that has been dictated by someone else. I had to start thinking about all of my friends, and for the very first time, David, I started thinking, which of my friends are white and which ones are black? I never thought of that in my life before, but now I had to think, well, maybe should I call that person or not call that person? And then I was like, they got me. They got me into that agenda. You walk into the restaurant, what do you want? Red or white wine? Who said I wanted anything to drink? Who said I wanted your wine? This is the same thing we're seeing. Does Black Lives Matter or not? Well, which one is it? Because if it's a yes, you're one thing. If it's a no, that's that. And yet I'm buying into it. And I see what happened in London yesterday. And you've got, Black Lives Matter protesting and the English Defence League protesting. And it just doesn't give me a lot of hope.
Well, there you go.
David.
There you go. What's that? Divide and rule.
I know.
Divide and rule. And you know, you've got the English Defence League, who are self-identifying with being British, English, whatever. And you've got the others that are coming from another direction. And they're, you know, giving it that. And yet you are a point of attention in the same consciousness that you are. You've just bought different perceptions. Why are you fighting each other? Because who benefits from you fighting each other? Those that want to divide and rule the target population. And you know, so many, you know, it's like there's nothing more manipulatable than genuineness that isn't streetwise. And I don't doubt that in many of the people who are protesting and helping to create this division, that they genuinely feel that they're doing something that's right. But that genuineness is so easy to manipulate if it's not streetwise. You know, I mean, it's a simple thing. Look at who funds that which is driving your behavior and your perceptions. If it was being funded and driven and orchestrated by people of the communities it's supposed to serve, then you've got a certain perception of that organization. But if it's funded by the 1%, what I call the cult, which couldn't give a damn about black people or white people or any others but itself, as I said earlier, then streetwise, why are they doing it? And if I do this as this wants me to, am I actually serving the interests of this 1%? And then you don't do it, or you do it in a different way. And you know, I want a world in which everyone has opportunity. They have equal opportunity within the limitations of their situation. I mean, see, what this whole Marxism tyranny wants to sell is that everyone should be equal. But what does that mean? Everyone should be equal. I would like to play in goal for Manchester United. I'm 68 and I have an arthritic hand. Ain't gonna happen. So what I'm gonna do is something that I can do. And I'm not going to complain that I'm limited, and I'm not going to say that I'm disabled and that it's the system that means I can't play for Manchester United. I look at the situation I'm in, and I achieve or seek to achieve on the basis of who I am. I'm a unique individual, so I will achieve in a unique way. This idea that everyone must be the same, it's a race to the bottom. What we need is equality of opportunity, so that someone's race or background is not a block on their ability to achieve what they want to achieve, as long as they have the ability to do it. We all have different abilities and different gifts. But what we don't want, surely, is equality of outcome, because that's a race to the bottom. Give people opportunity, and then what they do with that opportunity is entirely up to them. They might say, no, I don't want to take that opportunity. I want to go walking in India. All right, fine. Well, you know, enjoy. But just because you go walking in India and this person achieves something with their opportunity doesn't mean that they're privileged. It means they just took the opportunity and direction of life that was different to yours. to create this equality of opportunity, it's to create a massively, fundamentally more fair economic system.
So I'm looking forward to the next 6 months, and you're telling me we've got potential food shortages, second wave of the virus, more bankruptcies, harder economic times, and then a vaccine they're probably going to force down our throats and into our arms, and more fear in our children, our older people, and all of us. David, you got to leave me with some hope here, because that all looks dangerous, scary.
Well, yeah. But I have been warning about it for the best part of 30 years, and I spent a long time being laughed at and ridiculed for it. But I've kept going, because you can't walk away from this once you realize what's going on. And B, I have been optimistic. And the reason I've been optimistic is that just the numbers game. The number of people that are driving this is tiny. I mean, it's ridiculous. At its core, you'd get it in a room. And there's nearly 8 billion people. And I have been going on and on about this year after year after year because, people say, what are we going to do? Well, you can look for a solution and where do solutions usually lead? They lead to more problems that need more solutions. You see it all the time. What's the best way to remove a problem? To remove the frickin' cause of it. You take away the cause of a problem. Don't find a solution to it. Take away the cause, and the problem must cease to exist because its cause has been deleted. And I've talked about the cause at length today. It's human acquiescence to authority. And authority takes many forms. It's government, it's the cult beyond the government, it's administrators, it's security guards. But it's also the hierarchy of Black Lives Matter. It's also the hierarchy that's emerging already in this Chaz autonomous zone in Seattle that's been taken over and the police removed. Authority. Authority that tells you what to believe and what to do and wants to give you consequences for not believing it and doing it. You acquiesce to that and you're giving your freedom away. Acquiesce to that collectively, humanity gives its freedom away to a tiny few people. So, if what authority says is justified by the facts and by its impact upon humanity, i.e. it's not taking freedoms away, it's seeking to enhance freedom, then okay, I'll go with that. Yeah, makes sense. Why? Because I, in my uniqueness, have decided that that makes sense to me, therefore I will do it, because I agree with you. You tell me what I'm going to do that's going to take my freedom away for no other reason than you're telling me to do it. Well, you can stick that up your ass, mate. I ain't doing it. And if people just did that on a large scale, then authority would have to serve the people and not the people serve authority, because the people will not acquiesce to being dictated to in ways that enslave it. Therefore, you stop enslaving me, authority, or seeking to, and you start serving our interests of freedom and prosperity, and I will then make a deal with you. I'll accept what you say. But if you're trying to take my freedom away, and you're trying to dictate to me, you're trying to tell me to wear a mask when it's obviously a load of old crap and just about psychology and not about protection, well, you can stick that mask where the sun don't shine. You won't get a virus there then. And the people take the power back. And they say, you serve us. We're no longer serving you. And they will not be able to function in that environment unless they serve the interests of the population, because unless they do, the population ain't having it. The few control the many because the population frickin' have it. Now, if we need a wake-up call on what happens when you give your power away to authority, then in the last few months, you couldn't have had a more potent and blatant one. And come on, we're bigger than this. We're infinite expressions of consciousness. What are we doing letting a handful of people dictate our lives down to the fine detail? What are we doing policing each other? Saying that because you're making choices I don't agree with, I'm going to try to stop you making those choices, which is what the woke mentality is all about. You know, I've used this analogy before. People laugh at sheep because they follow the one in front and they follow the shepherd. Humans have out-sheeped the sheep. We've dispensed with a frickin' sheepdog. We keep each other in line. We don't need a sheepdog. Look at what's happened during the lockdown. It's classic cases of it. Is that the police? They've been out in their garden twice today. What? This is how the few control the many. And it's in our hands, in our perceptions, to stop it happening. Okay. Give us some optimism. Okay. When we stop doing that, game over. The question is, are enough people going to make that choice for the game to be over? Because the choice is there to be made. And that choice that is made, and it's in the next few weeks and months, the choice that is made there will decide if humanity heads into the darkest of fascist, tyrannical, technocratic nightmare, or whether at last, we take back the freedom that's been sitting there waiting. Generation after generation, era after era. Look at the whole entirety of human history. What is it a story of? It's a story of the masses giving their power away to a few people. What does that mean? A few people have run the world right their way through history. We have an opportunity now to stop that. Will we make that choice? The consequences of the choice we make are going to be monumental in the different world they'll create. And we need to make those choices now.
Last time you were here, you talked about fear and love, and how fear is ultimately the reason we don't make those choices. Fear of getting arrested, losing our business, dying from COVID-19. I mean, that's what's been weaponized against us. How can people confront their own fears? Because that's what's stopping people a lot of times from saying no to this sometimes ridiculous things that have been almost exposed in the last few months.
Yeah, but what is it a fear of? You know what I think it comes down to in the end? I think it's fear of death. I think that comes from everything. This is why this cult has worked, not least through mainstream science, to give us the impression that death is the end. It's lights out. There is no continuation. And the alternative we've been given to that is that at death we're going to be judged by some judgmental frickin' God. We're going to sit on his left hand or right hand or whatever bloody hand it is, or we're going to be stoking the fires of hell, right? So what death has become is a massive reason to fear. And the fear of death is an expression of fear of the unknown. And fear of the unknown is massive fear that people have. People limit themselves because they fear the unknown. That's why so many people want next week to be like this week, because it's their sense of security that nothing changes. So again, letting go of the fear of death is all part of this reevaluation of self-identity. See, I don't fear any of these people. I don't fear, I mean, people say, oh yeah, well, what do they think they'll do to you? I don't fear them. I don't fear them. I don't fear the consequences of challenging them. Why? Because I self-identify as being an expression of infinite awareness, an eternal, indestructible, unique expression of infinite awareness. And at some point, I'm going to leave this body and I'm going to explore forever, as I have done since in all my eternity, like everyone else. So there's no consequence relating to death that will limit me in what I do. And I can tell you from a personal point of view, that's an extraordinary freedom. Because from that, everything else comes. I'm an infinite expression of consciousness, having an endless, eternal series of experiences. So whatever experience I'm having now, someone ridiculing me or someone doing whatever, someone banning me from Facebook, ooh, in the great eternity of things, I don't think that's very important, do you? No. There'll be another experience along in a minute. It's just a experience I'm having in the moment. There'll be another one coming. And so you don't become enslaved by fear of consequences, because a consequence is just another experience, which will lead to another one and another one and another one. And because I self-identify with being consciousness and not the human experience I'm having, which is just the human experience, consequences just are not the same as if when you are identifying totally with the body and your human self, if you like, with all its sense of limitation and fears and what have you, you basically step back from it. And so what you do is you do what you believe to be right. And you don't well, if I do what I believe to be right, what's the consequences? That doesn't add to the equation. And what's been my experience, that if you stop fearing the consequences and just do what you believe to be right, the consequences you fear don't happen, right? They don't happen. It's this, a whole foundation of it is fear of death, which comes from not self-identifying with being an eternal flow of consciousness, which means death is just a release from the body. It's not the end. It's just the start of another experience. You just look at the life of the human world in a completely different way. So I'll challenge these people in every way I believe is effective, and I'll never worry about what they're going to do or whatever. And in the same way, I'm not limited by fear of what other people think. I mean, at some other point in the great flow of experiencing forever, am I going to be going, oh God, it was terrible what names they called me when I was in that body called David Icke? Just an experience. And so when you lose the fear of what other people think, because what you say is they have a right to think what they like, but so do I, then you're not limited by, if I say this, if I do this, What will people say? What will they say on social media? I don't give a shit. And it's an incredible freedom. And it frees you to speak your truth, whatever your truth is. See, I've said things over the years and written things that appear to be incredibly far out at the time. And I was laughed at and I was ridiculed. All right, write something else now. And now, so many of them are turning out to be actually, he were a bit closer to the truth than we thought, wasn't he? But if I'd have feared what other people thought and therefore censored myself, not said them, well, that's a bit far out, what will people say? Then people wouldn't be saying now, well, he said that and it's happening. So in so many ways, the greatest fears that people have are fear of death and fear of what other people think. And I can tell you, stick with it, because they'll think something else tomorrow. And if you are censoring yourself by what you fear they will think today, they won't be thinking something else about you tomorrow, because you wouldn't have said here what is shown to be credible there. Speak your truth. If people around you cannot respect your right to speak your truth, then what are they doing around you? Go and find another circle of people who will respect your right to be you. Don't try to persuade people and win them round when they just don't want to know. Just go and find some people that you can talk to that will respect you. Because what are you doing with people who don't have the respect for your right to your unique opinion? What are you doing with them? Go and find some other people. There's lots now, especially now. I mean, when I started out, there was very few, but now there's vast numbers of people that you can interact with that get where you're coming from, because they're coming from the same direction. Go and find them. Don't let people tell you what to say. Don't let people tell you what to think. Don't let people tell you what to do. You decide if you think that's valid, and if you think it is, then say it, do it, write it. But don't do it just because someone else tells you. That's how we got into this mess. It ain't the way we're going to get out of it.
Well, everything you said now has happened to us over the past 3 months. We've been speaking our truth, and everything I feared, my worst fears happened, David, and nothing bad happened. I told people for years that my entire business was based on YouTube and my relationship with them, which is literally, a moment's notice from disappearing. And yet we found a way through. We found a way to keep putting out these messages, and we found all of these allies along the way. And I found all of these people that say horrible things on social media about us, but we've realized that it's actually not so scary. And I feel great about my truth. And it makes me wonder about what are the things that stopped me in the past that I was living in fear of. And there's just no reason to be scared of these things.
There's no reason to be scared. The perception of the consequences are what frees people into inaction. When you actually go for it, there's always a way. We are infinite awareness living within an infinite field of all possibility. There's always a way. And in every cloud, there's always a silver lining. Right at the start of this chat, I talked about davidicke.com, iconic.com, the BitChute channel, the featured length documentaries that we're about to launch, and another one we're about to start filming, and the new book, The Answer, in a few weeks. All these outside of the apparent gods of communication, YouTube and Facebook, they've gone. I haven't given it a second thought. Okay, they've gone, fair enough. Facilitators of fascism, no longer dictating my life. Thank you. So how do we react to this? And you do, because possibilities are always there. It's fear that freezes people into inaction. Go for it. Listen, I tell you what happened to me. When I had my awakening, my massive explosive awakening in the very early 1990s, and I was ridiculed and massive. I mean, historic levels of ridicule I went through then. But I decided, because I realized that we were consciousness, I thought, what's the worst thing that I can do in the situation I'm in? It's completely knacker, bugger up, whatever. One brief life experience called human. That's the worst that can happen. So I'm going for it. And if you'd have said to someone in 1991, 92, 93, 94, 95, that this guy would be doing what I'm doing now, with enormous numbers of people actually looking at it with interest, they'd have laughed at you. What, Ike? He's finished, man. Done. Boom, boom, boom. Keep going. Keep going, keep going. And if what you're saying has validity, it will be shown to be so. If you speak your truth, and the rest will take care of itself. It really will. The one thing that is for sure is if you don't speak your truth, then the official narrative will go on being unchallenged and will go on in the direction we've been in. Time to speak your truth. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? And I have this thing I say, the deathbed perception, where you're lying on your deathbed, you've got 10 minutes to live. Now tell me what was important. Does it matter that someone put something horrible about you on Facebook? No. Does it matter that people laughed at you, ridiculed you? Does it matter this, that? No. None of those things matter at that point. Okay, well, I've got some good news for you. You haven't got 10 minutes to live. I was kidding you. Now get off your arse and live your life as if you've got 10 minutes to live. And see what really matters. And when you do, you find very little does that you think does. All the ridicule and abuse thrown at me, it's had no effect, because it would only have an effect if I decided to allow it, and I don't. So we are in control of our lives if only we realized it. The way we're controlled is to be persuaded we're not.